The story begins at Fujimi High School. A student is standing absent-mindedly on the balcony. His name is Takashi, and he is a student at the school. And Takashi is remembering the past. When he was little, a girl promised to marry him when they grew up. That girl's name is Rei. And she is Takashi's childhood friend. Rei used to have feelings for Takashi. But he didn't realize it. When Rei was held back a grade, Hisashi stayed with her, so she chose to be with Hisashi. And Hisashi is also Takashi's best friend. While Takashi was feeling down, Saya appeared. Saya is Takashi's classmate, and she scolded him for being an idiot, because he always skipped class to go up to the balcony. While Saya was talking, she saw Takashi spacing out again. Saya immediately knew he was thinking about the past again, so she got angry and walked away. Suddenly, Takashi saw a strange man at the school gate, which made him feel surprised. The man kept hitting the school gate, which made the teachers annoyed. At that moment, a teacher came over and grabbed the man's collar. But the teacher didn't know the man was a zombie. A female teacher advised him not to use force. At that moment, the zombie bit his arm, causing the teacher great pain and making him pass out. Suddenly, he woke up, and he began attacking the other teachers. At that moment, Takashi saw everything. He immediately ran back to the classroom to find Rei. And Takashi asked Rei to leave with him. But she refused and became angry. So Takashi helped her calm down. Just then, Hisashi arrived to see what was going on. So Takashi explained what had happened at the school gate. When Hisashi saw how determined Takashi was, he believed what Takashi said. Then they immediately left the classroom. And they began searching for weapons. Rei borrowed Takashi's phone to call her father, because her father is a police officer. But Rei couldn't get in touch with her father, which made her feel worried. At that moment, the school made an announcement over the loudspeaker. There was a riot happening at the school. But before the teacher could finish the announcement, he was attacked, causing all the students to panic. They started pushing and shoving each other to escape, making the school fall into chaos. Hirano is a chubby student. When he left, he ran into Saya. Meanwhile, Takashi's group headed toward the rooftop. On the way, they encountered a teacher, but he had already turned into a zombie. Suddenly, he lunged at Rei. Since it was their first time fighting a zombie, they felt confused and unsure. At that moment, Hisashi told Rei to stab the zombie. Then she stabbed the zombie in the heart. But it didn't die, which made Rei feel surprised. At that moment, Hisashi jumped in and locked the zombie's neck. But he got bitten on the arm by the zombie, causing Hisashi immense pain. Takashi and Rei did everything they could to save Hisashi. Then Takashi struck the zombie's head with a bat. At that moment, zombies were attacking students everywhere. Finally, Takashi's group reached the rooftop, and they saw the devastated cityscape. Zombies were all over the streets. At that moment, two schoolgirls were running away together. Suddenly, one of them was caught by a zombie. In order to save herself, the other girl abandoned her friend, but she was still attacked by the zombies. At that moment, a teacher became frantic, and he believed it was just a nightmare. So he thought he needed to wake up. Zombies were everywhere in the school. By now, they had reached the rooftop. Rei didn't know what to do. So Takashi told her to go to the observation deck and block the stairs. Then they broke through the horde together, so they could reach the observation deck. Suddenly, Rei stopped to attack a zombie. But the zombie didn't die, and it counterattacked Rei. At that moment, Hisashi grabbed Takashi's bat, and he rushed down to save Rei. Eventually, they made it to the observation deck, and they used desks and chairs to block the stairs. Rei wondered why this was happening. Suddenly, Hisashi coughed up blood, which made Rei very worried. It turned out Hisashi had been infected. Rei couldn't believe it was true, because Hisashi had just been bitten. At that moment, Hisashi asked Takashi to kill him, because he didn't want to turn into a zombie. And Hisashi wanted to die as a human. Hisashi's condition was getting worse, but Takashi couldn't bring himself to do it. After that, Hisashi turned into a zombie. In order to stop Rei from being bitten by Hisashi, Takashi had to kill him, which made Rei feel heartbroken. So she got angry at Takashi. And Rei believed that he hated Hisashi, because she and Hisashi were dating. At that moment, Takashi decided to leave, because he thought he was bothering Rei. Then Rei ran up and grabbed Takashi's hand tightly. And she begged him to stay with her. By now, the school had fallen into complete chaos. Saya and Hirano formed a group to escape. When Saya asked Hirano what he planned to do, he said he wanted to find the teachers. But Saya told him he was being stupid, because the teachers couldn't do anything in this situation. Suddenly, Saya stopped abruptly, and she asked Hirano if he wanted to live or die. Then Saya pointed toward the faculty room. He saw many students standing in front of the door. But when they opened the door, it was full of zombies. It turned out all the teachers had become zombies, which terrified Hirano. After that, they continued moving. On the rooftop, the zombies were attacking wildly. At that moment, Rei felt very sad, because she had just witnessed Hisashi die in front of her. Meanwhile, Takashi was remembering the moment Hisashi begged him, and when he had to kill Hisashi, which startled Takashi. After Rei calmed down, she borrowed Takashi's phone, so she could call her father. Although her father's phone connected, he didn't recognize Rei's voice. He thought it was Takashi. So Rei's father gave some instructions, and he spoke very urgently. It seemed like Rei's father was in danger. After that, the call was lost, which caused Rei to panic and cry. At that moment, Hirano asked Saya if she had a phone. She asked him who he would call if she did. Hirano thought he would call the police. But Saya called him an idiot, because all the police had already been deployed, and too many people were already infected. While they were talking, a zombie appeared behind them. Saya immediately told Hirano to get out of there, and she felt annoyed being stuck with Hirano. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, a student was turning into a zombie. Another student immediately grabbed a stick to attack the zombie. Meanwhile, a teacher didn't know what to do, so she went to gather some medicines. Her name was Shizuka, the school nurse. After the student dealt with the zombie, he went to convince Shizuka to leave, but she needed to grab a few more things. Suddenly, zombies appeared and broke down the door. Because he had to protect Shizuka, the zombies attacked him, which terrified Shizuka. At that moment, the zombies turned toward Shizuka, but a girl suddenly appeared, and she took down the zombies. Her name was Seiko Busujima, and she was the captain of the Kendo club. She then approached and praised the boy's bravery. Seiko asked if he knew what would happen after being bitten, and she said she was ready to help if he needed it. Even though it was her first time killing someone, the boy thanked Seiko. Shizuka tried to stop Seiko, but Seiko believed this was her duty, and she said she was protecting the honor of a man, which frightened Shizuka. At that moment, the zombies broke down the door and stormed in. Meanwhile, Saya's group arrived at the equipment room. She found a lot of tools, and they planned to use them as weapons. While observing, Hirano saw a nail gun. He also found attachments for the nail gun. Since the nail gun didn't have proper aim, he made a sight for the nail gun. While Hirano was modifying the nail gun, zombies had reached the door of the room, because they had made too much noise. As the zombies broke through the door, Saya screamed in fear. At that moment, Hirano had finished the upgrade. He immediately took down the zombie, which surprised Saya. Meanwhile, on the rooftop, the zombies were about to break through the barricade, but Takashi used water pressure to attack them, making the zombies fall off the staircase. Saya then gathered a few more things, and she prepared to leave. Suddenly, Hirano became courageous. He stepped forward to clear the way for Saya. After Takashi dealt with the zombies, they decided to leave the rooftop. After that, they attacked the zombies to break through the siege. Upon leaving the rooftop, they didn't know where to go, so Takashi said he would go home, and they would help any survivors. At that moment, Rei said Takashi should also call home. Takashi said his father was on a business trip, and his mother was out teaching, so no one would answer if he called. At that moment, Saya was experimenting with a piece of cloth, and she discovered the zombies couldn't see. They only responded to sound. Suddenly, Saya saw a lot of zombies behind them. Meanwhile, Seiko and Shizuka were heading to the faculty room, because she had left her car keys in the faculty room. And Shizuka asked why Seiko didn't kill the zombies. Because Seiko didn't have time to kill them. Suddenly, they heard a noise coming from the faculty room. It turned out Saya's group was being attacked by zombies. At that moment, Hirano asked Saya to help him, because his gun was almost out of ammo, which made Saya angry. Suddenly, a zombie appeared behind her. Hirano's gun was also out of bullets, which made Saya scream in fear. At that moment, everyone heard Saya's scream, so they followed the direction of the scream. The zombie attacked Saya. She threw whatever she could at the zombie. but Saya still couldn't stop it. Then she used a drill to attack it. At that moment, everyone else arrived. They teamed up to deal with the surrounding zombies. After that, everyone introduced themselves to each other. But Saya was still in shock, so she lashed out at everyone. Then the others tried to comfort Saya, which made her burst into tears. After that, Takashi and Hirano used some tables and chairs to block the door. And everyone was exhausted. They planned to leave using Shizuka's car, but her car was too small. So Seiko suggested using the school's bus instead. Suddenly, Rei saw news on the TV. The government claimed it was just a riot, which surprised everyone, and they realized how serious the situation had become. It was affecting the entire world. At that moment, Takashi was angry, because they weren't giving any more information. Saya believed they were afraid of causing panic. Rei couldn't believe the world had changed in just a few hours. And she thought everything would return to normal. But Saya said that it was just Rei's fantasy. Because zombies are a type of infectious disease. And it's similar to the flu pandemic of 1918. The flu pandemic stopped because too many people died. But zombies won't stop, because the dead will rise and attack others. At this point, Shizuka thought they would decompose on their own. But Saya said that's for normal people. Zombies are immune to bacteria. Right now, they need to find a safe place to survive. And everyone must not act on impulse. Therefore, everyone must act as a team. At this point, they left the teacher's room. And they headed toward the parking lot to leave. Hirano used a gun to take down 2 zombies to clear the way. After that, everyone moved forward together. At this point, Seiko reminded everyone, they don't necessarily have to fight, unless they are forced into a situation where they must. The fewer battles they have, the higher their survival rate. At this point, they discovered a group of students surrounded by zombies. So, Hirano used his gun to take down 1 zombie. And everyone rushed in to deal with the remaining zombies. In the end, they saved the group of students. Seiko then asked if anyone had been bitten, and she received confirmation from them. At this moment, Takashi came to ask if they wanted to join him. And everyone immediately agreed. Right now, the school gate is the only exit. But there are a lot of zombies there. If they stay here, they might be attacked. So when Takashi heard Saya say that the zombies couldn't see, only hear, he went down to verify Saya's words. At this moment, a zombie walked toward him. But it just walked past Takashi. He picked up a shoe. Then Takashi threw the shoe in the opposite direction, to lead the zombies toward that way. After that, everyone silently left. It seemed like they could leave safely. But by accident, a student made a noise, which frightened everyone. The zombies heard the noise too. So they started to gather even more. While Hirano didn't know what to do, Takashi rushed in to attack the zombie. And everyone sped up to break through the encirclement. Then they ran toward the bus. They fought the zombies along the way. But 1 student was surrounded and attacked by the zombies. After much effort, finally, they managed to get on the bus. Takashi stayed behind to help everyone get on the bus. As they were preparing to drive away, Takashi noticed a group of students being chased by zombies. He was about to go down to rescue the group of students, when Rei realized it was teacher Shido. So she stopped Takashi from going to save him. Although Takashi didn't know what had happened, he didn't want more people to get hurt. At this moment, Shido was guiding everyone to run toward the bus. Suddenly, a student tripped and fell. But he ignored the student and turned away. After seeing that everyone had boarded the bus, Shizuka drove the bus away. However, there were too many zombies in front. So Shizuka drove the bus through them. After that, they left the school. The bus had gone for a while when Shido asked Seiko if she was the leader of the group. Seiko said that she wasn't the leader. And they survived thanks to their teamwork. Rei said Takashi would regret saving him. At this point, a student showed signs of displeasure when he learned that Takashi's group was planning to return to the city. Instead of finding a safe place to take shelter, it made Shizuka angry. Suddenly, he pointed at Takashi and said he couldn't stand Takashi. Suddenly, Rei stood up and gave him a lesson. At this moment, Shido praised their teamwork, but he told everyone that they needed a leader to handle situations like this. Since he was a teacher, he claimed that he was the one deserving to be the leader. However, Shido was only supported by the students he had saved, but his actions made Rei angry. So she kicked the bus door open and left. Rei said she would never ride with Shido again. At this point, Takashi chased after her to persuade her, saying that it would be very dangerous for her to go alone. Suddenly, a vehicle came rushing toward them. It turned out the driver and passengers had all turned into zombies. So the vehicle lost control and crashed into another car, causing the vehicle to flip over on the road. This caused Takashi to be separated from Seiko's group. They could only agree to meet at the police station. After that, Seiko returned to the bus and looked for a way into the city, while Takashi led Rei out of the tunnel to avoid the explosion. Suddenly, Takashi was unexpectedly attacked by a zombie, leaving him unable to react in time. But Rei managed to take it down. After that, they found a motorcycle, so Takashi used it to take Rei back to the city. At night, they stopped on a quiet road and looked down at the city full of zombies. Rei asked Takashi if anyone would come to help them. He believed no one would come to help because in the afternoon, he saw many helicopters, but no one paid attention to the survivors. While the two were arguing, the zombies appeared from behind, so they immediately left the area. At this time, Seiko's group was still stuck in traffic, because there were too many people fleeing the city. As the situation on the bridge grew more tense, Shido tried to act tough, and said he was ready to protect the students, which made Seiko's group dislike him even more. When Takashi entered the city, he saw the desolate, deserted scene. After that, they stopped to observe the situation. Suddenly, Rei spotted a police car. They thought someone would help them. It turned out the police officer was dead. They then approached to search for anything useful. The two found a gun and some ammunition. Although Takashi didn't know how to use a gun, but he still took it with him for self-defense. After that, they got in the car and left. At this point, the two saw a gas station. But when Takashi pulled in, he realized that it was a self-service gas station. If they wanted to fill up, they would need money, but they no longer had any money on them. So, he left Rei outside, and told her to yell if there was any danger. Then he went inside to look for money. As soon as he entered, he saw the cash register, but it was broken and no longer working. So, he smashed the machine to get the money. At that moment, Takashi heard Rei's scream. When he came outside, Takashi saw Rei being held hostage by a big guy. He used Rei to threaten Takashi, which made Takashi angry. While the guy was distracted, Rei pushed him away and tried to run, but she was caught again right after. At that point, the guy told Takashi to throw the stick and fill the gas tank. With no other choice, Takashi had to obey his command. After that, he deliberately provoked the guy while he wasn't paying attention. Takashi took the gun and pointed it at the guy. He told him to let Rei go. Then Takashi shot him, wounding him. At that moment, Rei was about to teach him a lesson, but Takashi stopped her. They didn't have time for that. Takashi believed the zombies would arrive soon, because they had made too much noise, which had attracted the zombies. After that, they got in the car and left, leaving him to be dealt with by the zombies. This made him panic. At this point, Takashi felt anxious, because the farther they went, the more danger they would face. The zombies had appeared at the airport, but they were taken down by a female sniper. They also wondered how the zombies made it to the airport since the airport had been sealed off. While the airport situation was under control, they didn't know how long it would last, because their ammunition was not unlimited. They were called in under the guise of counter-terrorism. At this point, Seiko's group was still stuck in traffic. Saya thought that cars weren't the only way to escape. They could use an airplane to escape to the islands. So, Hirano said they could go there. But Saya thought it was too late, because the area had been taken over by the military. They would limit the number of people coming in and out. At this point, Saya needed to find someone trustworthy. She thought of Takashi. So, Hirano asked if she liked Takashi, which made her embarrassed. Everyone was also worried about Takashi. At this moment, Takashi encountered a group of people fighting zombies. But as he passed by, they turned around and attacked him. This confused Rei, as she didn't understand why they wanted to kill him. Takashi thought they had gone mad. At this point, Takashi was planning to cross the bridge into the city, but he found the bridge was jammed with cars. So, they had to find another way into the city. Meanwhile, Shido was giving a lecture to his students, as if he was recruiting followers for himself. When Saya saw Seiko paying attention to Takashi, she asked about Seiko's family. Seiko explained that she lived with her father, but her father was currently abroad. So, her task was to stay alive. and she had to keep her promise to Takashi. As for Saya's house, it was in the same neighborhood as Takashi's. Suddenly, Hirano said that his family wasn't there. So, he would follow Saya wherever she went, which surprised Saya. At this point, Shizuka said she was alone, so she would go with everyone. Shizuka also didn't like Shido. After that, everyone decided to head to Onbetsu Bridge. At this point, Shido said that everyone needed to cooperate, but Saya refused him, because they had their own plan. Shido said that Saya could make her own decision, but Shizuka couldn't leave, because Shido needed a nurse like her right now. Suddenly, Hirano shot nails toward Shido. At that moment, he remembered when he was in school. Shido had treated him like an outcast, which made Hirano angry. This caused Shido to fear and step back. After that, Hirano provided cover for everyone to get off the bus. At this point, Takashi didn't know how to cross the river. Rei suggested checking other bridges, but Takashi thought it was pointless, because all the other bridges had been blocked. Suddenly, they heard Hirano's gunshots. It turned out Seiko's group was surrounded by zombies. At this moment, Hirano was almost out of bullets, which left Hirano feeling confused. But he wasn't good at close combat, so only Seiko could fight. At this point, a zombie attacked Saya, which made it impossible for Seiko to react in time. Suddenly, Takashi drove the car onto the bridge, knocking the zombies away. Rei ran out to deal with the remaining ones. After that, he drove the car to where Hirano was. Takashi also handed the gun to Hirano. After Hirano got the gun, he shot and impaled 2 zombies. At this point, Takashi also knocked away the zombies blocking their way. After that, he went to help Seiko, helping her take down the remaining zombies. Everyone felt relieved when they reunited. Hirano was excited to hold a real gun, while everyone was unsure what to do. Shizuka suggested they rest, and she knew a place where they could rest, which was nearby where they were standing. It turned out it was a friend of Shizuka's house, and she said her friend had a private car. To keep everyone safe, Takashi and Shizuka went ahead to check. When they arrived, it was getting dark. At this point, everyone also learned about her friend's private car. It turns out to be a military special purpose vehicle. It piqued everyone's curiosity about Shizuka's friend. When they thought they were safe, zombies suddenly reappeared, and everyone began their sweep. While everyone was showering, Takashi and Hirano looked for something useful, but they only found boxes of ammunition. When they opened the remaining door, the two discovered many guns in a cabinet. This excited Hirano, and he knew each type of gun well. By accident, Takashi pointed a gun at him, which startled Hirano. Hirano then told Takashi that zombies were the enemies he should point a gun at. Takashi also hoped he would only point a gun at zombies, but Hirano said that if the situation worsened, there would be no such thing as surrender in war. Takashi was impressed by Hirano's skillful movements, so he thought Hirano must have practiced with fake guns. At this moment, Takashi realized Hirano had been trained in shooting in the US, seeing how proficient Hirano was with guns. Takashi felt lucky to be on the same side as Hirano, and they learned that Shizuka's friend was part of a special forces unit. Meanwhile, Takashi kept watching the developments on the bridge. At this point, the situation on the bridge was very chaotic. The police had set up a quarantine barrier to limit the spread of the disease, but the disease continued to spread rapidly, so people began to doubt the feasibility of this measure. At that moment, a police officer was calling for reinforcements, but they told him he could do whatever he wanted, which made him angry. Takashi saw the situation worsening. At that moment, Hirano observed a strange scene, so he told Takashi to turn on the TV and watch. It turned out that some people stood up to protest, believing that a biological weapon caused the disease, which surprised Takashi. At this point, the police had drawn their guns to attack the zombies. Suddenly, a woman screamed, and she pleaded with everyone to save her child. But she was killed by her own child, causing the police to panic. Because they still had to maintain order, they continued to attack the zombies. At this point, someone had incited the protesters to turn against the police. The police officer, in order to end the protest, killed the leader of the protest, as they were allowed to use any means necessary to maintain order. At this moment, Shizuka suddenly appeared from behind. She suddenly hugged Takashi, surprising both of them. Then, she kissed Hirano, making him excited. At this point, Takashi advised Shizuka not to make any noise, but she said she was afraid of silence. After that, Shizuka fainted. At this point, Hirano went outside to keep watch, while Takashi took Shizuka back to her sleeping spot. On the way, he met Rei. In just one day, she had lost Hisashi, and she couldn't contact her father, making Rei feel hopeless. Finally, Takashi managed to get Shizuka to her resting place. Then, he went to the kitchen to find a drink, and Takashi saw Seiko preparing dinner, which startled him. While the two were talking, Rei suddenly called his name. Seiko suggested that Takashi should go check on her, as the girl was very weak at this moment. But when he reached her, she kept mentioning Hisashi, which made Takashi angry, and he believed that Rei should accept it. Hisashi had been transformed and had died. She then grabbed Takashi's hand. When Rei approached to kiss Takashi, suddenly, he heard the sound of barking dogs. He ran to the balcony to check the situation. At this point, the situation on the bridge was even more chaotic. A police officer had ordered the driver to drive the vehicle toward the zombies, causing people to scatter and panic. The zombies had gathered in large numbers, and one person was fighting the zombies, but he was surrounded by them. From above, Takashi's group saw this scene. They thought the situation was getting worse. When Hirano was about to use a gun to shoot the zombies, Seiko reminded him the zombies would react to the sound, which frightened Hirano. After that, she went inside and turned off all the lights, because she feared many people would come looking for help, and they wouldn't be able to assist everyone. She told Takashi thought they would have to get used to the world changing. While Takashi was observing the situation, he saw a father and child who had escaped the zombies, and they entered the house across the street to ask for help. But the family there had no intention of helping them. When he was about to break the door, the people inside opened the door for him. Then, they stabbed the father to death with a knife, and left the little girl outside. At this point, the little girl ran to check on her father. Then she hugged her father and started crying. The girl's cries attracted the zombies, and the zombies began heading in her direction. When a zombie was about to attack the girl, Hirano used his gun to shoot it, causing the girl to be shocked. At this moment, Takashi took a car to go save the girl. Suddenly, Saya came over, unaware of what was happening. So Rei told her she had discovered something interesting, that they were still human. At this point, Takashi was on his way to the girl, with Hirano using the gun to assist him. Takashi managed to reach the girl. The girl was sitting in the corner of the wall, terrified. Suddenly, Takashi appeared and took down the zombies, causing the girl to be amazed. Suddenly, a zombie attacked him from behind. Thanks to the girl reminding him, Takashi pulled out his gun and took it down. Takashi dealt with all the zombies in the yard. At this point, he saw the father had sacrificed himself to protect his daughter. So Takashi took his jacket to cover him, and he plucked a flower branch to give to the little girl, to let her say goodbye to her father. Takashi told her he was a wonderful father, causing the girl to cry uncontrollably. When Takashi saw that the zombies had surrounded the gate, he carried the girl on his back and climbed over the wall to leave. At this point, everyone was preparing to leave. They believed it was no longer safe there, because the gunshots had attracted the zombies. So they gathered the necessary supplies, then packed everything onto the vehicle. While Hirano didn't know how to get to Takashi, Saya signaled for him to prepare to leave. When everyone was ready, they noticed Hirano was missing. Suddenly, he appeared, covered in weapons, looking like a real soldier. At this point, everyone was gathered. They drove to pick up Takashi. After they arrived at Takashi's location, Seiko and Hirano dealt with the surrounding zombies, helping Takashi jump onto the vehicle. Once everyone was safely on the vehicle, they immediately set off toward the city. After a tiring night, they finally made it to the other shore, but they didn't see anyone. At this point, they also learned her name was Alice, and her father was a journalist. Hirano also named the dog Zeke. While everyone was choosing clothes, Hirano handed Takashi a gun, and he also taught Takashi how to use it, but Takashi felt he was more suited to a bat. At this point, the girls were ready, which amazed Hirano. Hirano and Takashi went ahead to check, after which everyone followed and went upstairs. At this point, everyone didn't know what to do, so Takashi suggested going to Saya's house, because her house was the closest. After that, they continued their journey. Alice felt excited when she saw many motorcycles. Takashi, however, felt suspicious, because he no longer saw any planes or helicopters. At this moment, Rei said to Takashi that today they hadn't seen any zombies, which surprised Takashi. Suddenly, Hirano spotted the zombies, so they had to turn in a different direction to avoid them. Takashi didn't understand why there were more and more zombies. By accident, they drove into a road with a barbed wire fence. Because Shizuka couldn't brake in time, the vehicle crashed into the barbed wire fence. This caused Rei to be thrown off the vehicle. At this point, the zombies were heading toward Rei, causing her to panic, but Takashi rushed down just in time to protect Rei. The zombies kept coming in larger numbers, so everyone drew their weapons to fight back. Because Takashi didn't know how to use a gun, he couldn't take down any zombies. Hirano, however, had been trained, so he managed to take down a lot of zombies. Seiko also joined the fight. The zombies kept coming in larger and larger numbers, and the ammo they had wasn't enough. At this point, they couldn't start the vehicle, which made Takashi feel desperate. Suddenly, Zeke charged out and attacked a zombie, which lifted Takashi's spirits. When Saya was about to take the gun and charge in, Takashi took the gun back from Saya, and he charged in to fight the zombies in close combat. Seeing this, Seiko also rushed in to fight alongside Takashi. The two of them cooperated to attack the zombies, intentionally making noise to lure them in, but the zombies were still heading toward the vehicle. When Hirano saw the situation was becoming more dangerous, he told Alice and Zeke to go over the fence first, but she cried and refused to agree, because Alice had just lost her father, so she wanted to stay with everyone. Suddenly, a rescue team appeared. They began attacking the zombies, and helped everyone get over the fence. At this point, Takashi was suspicious and didn't know who they were. It turned out that it was Saya's mother. She came to rescue Saya and her friends, which made Saya feel happy. Meanwhile, Takashi and Seiko were too far from the fence. They couldn't regroup with the others, so they had to take a detour to Saya's house. After traveling for a while, Takashi saw a vehicle store. They decided to go inside to check, and found an off-road vehicle. They used this vehicle to head to Saya's house, but the zombies on the road were too many, so they had to stop and rest on a patch of land in the middle of the river. At this point, Takashi asked Seiko if she had someone she loved, and she said she liked a certain boy, which made him feel sad. After that, they continued on their journey. At this point, Takashi drove the vehicle into the lake in the park. He used the noise of the vehicle to attract the zombies, so they could leave the park safely. Seiko was fighting the zombies at the same time. Suddenly, she saw a group of children turned into zombies, which made her hesitate and unable to act. When a zombie was about to bite Seiko, Takashi ran over and shot it dead. Afterward, they spent the night at a temple. At this point, Takashi saw a real sword, so he took it for Seiko as a weapon. That night, as they were talking, she mentioned the boy she liked, but Seiko didn't confess, because she thought no one would like a killer. Takashi then comforted her, saying that the things Seiko did were out of necessity. Seiko then told him, 4 years ago, she was harassed by a man, and she defeated him with a wooden sword, breaking his shoulder and thigh bones. Since the police knew she was only defending herself, they took Seiko home, but she felt excited by what she did. When Seiko became more and more agitated, so Takashi held her hand to comfort her. As a result, they developed feelings for each other. The next morning, they prepared to leave, but the zombies suddenly appeared at the temple. At that moment, Takashi saw that Seiko seemed unstable, so he went to hug her. Takashi then told her that he didn't care about her past, and that she was the most wonderful girl. He begged Seiko to live for him and for herself. At that moment, she regained her composure. In an instant, Seiko broke through the encirclement, and she and Takashi made their way to Saya's house. At that time, Hirano and Alice were waiting for them at the back gate of Saya's house. Finally, they arrived at Saya's house. They had been staying at Saya's mansion for a while. Takashi planned to help the people there, but they refused his help, because they saw Takashi as just a child. Takashi was talking to Seiko when Alice walked in from the gate, and Takashi felt happy for Alice, because she had become cheerful and lively. At that moment, Takashi heard Saya and her mother arguing. It turned out that she was angry, because her mother thought she was no longer alive, so they hadn't sent anyone to look for her. At this moment, Saya's mother came to meet Takashi. She explained to Takashi that Saya's father is the head of the Takagi family. So, he can't take care of himself. He also has to take care of the people in the family. And Saya's father is the one who coordinates the planes protecting the power plant. She also told Takashi that the people in the power plant haven't seen their families since the disaster occurred. So, she asked Takashi to find a way to convince her. At this moment, someone came to inform Saya. Their car had been repaired. Then everyone gathered in Rei's room to discuss whether to stay or leave. But Takashi saw that Saya was still resentful of her parents. So, he angrily approached and grabbed Saya's collar. And Takashi said that Saya was the luckiest person, because she could know that her parents were still safe. At this moment, a convoy of cars entered the mansion. It turned out that Saya's father had returned. He even brought a zombie back with him. And that zombie was Saya's father's close friend. He had been bitten while helping his teammates. Then Saya's father decapitated the zombie in front of everyone. Because he wanted everyone to know the reality. If they wanted to survive, they had to fight. Suddenly, Hirano said that using a sword is not enough to kill a zombie, because the sword would break when it hit the bones. But Seiko disagreed with Hirano's point of view, which made Hirano angry, and he left. When Takashi returned to the house, Alice immediately told him that everyone became weak after coming to Saya's house. After she left, Takashi became worried that the peace there had made everyone weak. While he was thinking about this, Alice ran over to tell him that Hirano was in trouble. It turned out that he was having his gun confiscated by Saya's family. But Hirano stubbornly refused, because he didn't want to become useless again. Suddenly, Saya's father appeared, and he asked Hirano what he could do with the gun. Hirano still didn't know how to answer. Then Takashi stepped in and said that Hirano had used the gun to protect Saya. At that moment, everyone also admitted that without Hirano, they probably wouldn't have made it this far. Even Saya said that Hirano had protected her, something that her father couldn't do. Meanwhile, a student who stayed with Shido was reporting to him about the situation at the mansion. At this moment, Shido was still lecturing his students. One student was kicked out of the car because he had contradicted him, and Shido let the zombies attack him. At this point, the remaining survivors were panicking because they thought Saya was controlling them through force. So Saya tried to calm them down, but it didn't work. Suddenly, Takashi was chosen to be the group leader because he was deemed qualified to lead the group, which surprised Takashi. At this moment, Seiko was gifted the Murata sword by Saya's father, but Seiko couldn't accept it without a reason. It turned out that Seiko's father had been his teacher, so Saya's father gave the sword to her as a sign of respect, and he also considered it a thank you gift for Seiko saving his daughter. While Takashi was thinking about becoming the leader, Rei suddenly walked in and told him about the daughter. The daughter likes people who are kind and treat them well. Before, Takashi didn't have that quality, but now he had changed. So Rei wanted to be with him. When Rei was leaving, she ran into Seiko at the door. She said that she had just arrived and hadn't heard anything. Then, he went to see Saya's father to inform him that he would leave to find his family and go to the police station to look for information about Rei's father. At this moment, Saya's father also told him that they would leave the mansion in 2 days because they thought it was no longer safe there. As everyone was preparing to leave, Rei suddenly saw Shido walking in. It turned out that he had used his students to deceive the guards and get them into the mansion. At this moment, Rei aimed her bayonet at him. It turned out that Shido's father was a senator. He had told Shido to make Rei fail the class as revenge for Rei's father, which made Rei's father always feel guilty towards her. At this moment, Saya's father appeared and said that if Rei wanted to kill Shido, she could do it. Now, Shido's life was in Rei's hands, but Rei didn't kill him because Shido wasn't worth her time. Afterward, he and his students were kicked out of the mansion. A US submarine had received an order to fire missiles at the place where the most severe part of the pandemic was taking place. At this moment, Shizuka remembered her friend's phone number, and she said her friend was a member of the SAT. So Shizuka borrowed Takashi's phone to call her friend. While the two were talking, they lost contact because a nuclear warhead had exploded, causing all electrical devices to stop working. At this moment, Shido's car also lost control, so they crashed straight into the security fence, allowing the zombies to flood into the mansion. At this moment, Saya said that this was due to an electromagnetic pulse. The electrical pulses traveling through the antenna caused the circuits to short circuit. At this moment, Saya's father came over and praised her, because Saya had remained calm in such a situation. At this point, the zombies had reached the mansion's gate. He immediately ordered to close the gate, but one zombie managed to get inside, so Hirano dealt with it. But the zombies were growing in number, and the gate couldn't withstand the pressure, so it was knocked down by the zombies. They began to pour into the mansion. At this point, Saya's mother also joined the battle. She gave Saya a gun, and asked Hirano to teach Saya how to use it. At this point, the mansion had become chaotic, and Takashi's group also joined the fight. Alice also helped by handing ammunition to Hirano. At this moment, Saya's father gathered those who could fight to break through the encirclement together. He also asked Hirano to take care of Saya, but she refused, so Saya was slapped by her mother. Because asking others to take care of Saya was selfish, so Saya shouldn't make them feel awkward. She understood everything, and left ahead with her teammates. They found out that the car wasn't affected by the electromagnetic pulse, because it was coated with 3 layers of copper. But he needed some time to fix it, so the group had to hold off the zombies. After that, they immediately got into the car and prepared to leave. They asked Uncle Mato to come along, but he was a member of the Takagi family, so Mato stayed behind to fight. At this moment, Saya's father cleared the way for them to leave. When he knew they had left, Saya's father no longer had any worries, so they fought with all their might. The car could only go a short distance, because Mato didn't have enough time to fix it, so the car was about to break down again. After everyone reached the highway, they had to stop the car, because there were a lot of zombies ahead. Takashi, as the group's leader, so he immediately ordered everyone to fight, to allow them to continue their journey. That's all for today's video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, to support Oni-chan in the next videos. Thank you for watching. Love you all.